suffering from the fatalism of architecture. These documents are reminders of desperation and leisure, pictorials of incongruences in time and culture, allowed for by traverses of political, economic, and real geographies.
Making meaning to discern the horizon through the night of a hollow and infertile life. The suddenness of lightning in a pervasive miasma called a today without a tomorrow. When lying in your bed, the room you exist in is not made from stone or wood, but from memory, desire, and loss. Windows of imagination spring into being, and even the possibility of rekindled and impossible joy appears as doors to a somewhere else that feels more like a home than any architectural actuality.
The dark behind your eyes is the obfuscation of a dense cloud, a cacophony of symbols and signs. The full and noisome universe of a history of tension, debt and balance, of gravity and aspiration, thunderous and fated steamships of the heart. Your house is founded on, naturally, an abyss that is a hallucination, a libidinal economy that is as regulated as the most conservative of national banks. In other words, a myth. The myth, for all myths are the one myth of the beginning and ending of the world.
More and more generations are becoming dyslexic. They are incapable of having letters represent anything, as the image has replaced language. Now the image has been consumed into the speed of perception itself. This is why so many architects clad their monstrosities in mirror, metal, and glass. Everything that is real is actually supposed to be insubstantial, and vice versa. The time frequency of light has become the determining factor in the apperception of phenomena, leaving the spatial frequency of matter for dead.
You're not smart enough to say that.
Okay, it's true. I heard it in a pop song.
Received today at 6:16 p.m.
I need more money. Send my last payment. I'm in Rome. I'm on my way to Varanasi. I'm going to fax you the particulars. I'm sorry about the breakdown. I had to get away. One more lousy condo project and I was going to put the bullet to myself. Running out of lira. Gotta go. Thanks. We'll send videotape.
End of message.
The first book on architecture is in fact 10 books.
Well, it is the first book that we have. I mean, there were probably other books.
The Roman Vitruvius. He lived 40 years before Christ in what the old scholars call the Golden Age. 8 of the books are about buildings. But then the two other books are about machines and timepieces. Timepieces as in sundials, using the shadow cast by the sun to tell the time. It's the shadow that's important, the insubstantial shadow.
Originally a pagan temple to nature, a light machine, a timepiece, a calendar. Also, it is the lesson in the self. Listen, you stare up to imagine your own eye. It is how focus is created by concentration, how this then creates contrasts, foreground and background, and then how one loses awareness of the whole by this concentration. Yet, simultaneously, if one pays attention, awareness is brought back to the source of the focus. In fact, in 608 AD, the Pantheon was conceded by the emperor to Pope Boniface IV, who transformed it into a church. Fact, the Pantheon is 43.30 meters in diameter and 21.65 meters high. And so there is implied that the building is a perfect sphere. An invisible negative projection completes the building by the viewer's mindfulness to the balance of dimensions. Of course, this negative half also has an opening, but it opens to a world that is ultimately unknown. Being thoroughly alive is a series of seductions and forgetful intoxications, an absorption in one way or another in the contours of needs and pleasures, usually an imagined reflection of forms, a balance of attractions that ultimately cancel each other out. The result of this perfect symmetry is an absolute negation, a vanishing point identical to the infinite. That is why the most consummate of buildings, such as the Pantheon, are machines of the mind, and its actual presence signals the intersection of the eternal with the mortal. In the 17th century, Urban VII stripped the bronze ceiling of the portico of the Pantheon and melted it down to make the canopy over the main altar of San Pietro and 80 cannons for the papal see. The canopy by Bernini is arguably the most interesting work in St. Peter's. It is other than all the other work in this Catholic capital. It is pagan in its complex and twisting forms. It is maybe the revenge of the Pantheon, the supremacy of nature in the temple devoted to a man. A field of poppies and wheat grows atop the catacombs of Rome. Half a million inhabitants of this city of the dead, awaiting for the final judgment and their union in a renewed and utopian earth. Waiting for the moment to rise from their sleep, to be citizens in the city of God. In their bodies to be made immortal, in their Master Christ. Half a million inhabitants of this city of the dead. The galleries, sometimes in 4 levels, are over 12 miles long. A field of poppies and wheat grows atop the catacombs of Rome. I haven't told you this, but since we're on the subject of form, I think it's about time that I talk to you about... I have a personal cloud. Even on the bluest of days, I can sense it over the horizon. It could be in the east, the west, the north, the south, somewhere in the never-reaching arrow of the four directions. Of course, it is not only my cloud. I just happen to recognize it as the same cloud wherever I go. I first recognized it in a painting of Brueghel the Elder, his large Tower of Babel picture. The cloud was to the left of the building, not as ominous as his larger brother cloud to the right. A cloud is a shelter for weather, gray shades, rainwater. As such, it functions as a mobile, momentary architecture. But no, it's an anti-architecture. It's the prototype of all uncertains of shape. A cloud is a cloud is a cloud is a cloak of wisps of black and white, and isn't anything in particular. You can send a whole squadron of bombers right through it. The cloud doesn't care. The cloud lives between heaven and earth. It's generally impartial. It doesn't mind hanging out with other clouds, but it can just as well exist by itself and wouldn't whimper about being lonely. One can imagine holding a cloud delicately in one's hand and petting it, but you couldn't smooth out a cloud's inherent abstraction. The cloud doesn't believe in gravity. It weighs less than air. It's completely unmanageable and doesn't think about tomorrow. Clouds are blatant representatives of the will of nature, floating armadas of extremely determined and complex fluff. One of my best photographs of the cloud was taken in Lucknow, Uttar Pradesh, North India. The cloud is here foregrounded by a prodigal and delirious column, constructed in the 1780s by the Frenchman General Claude Martin. A good businessman, an excellent opportunist, and an even better eccentric. The last time I saw the cloud was out my office window, just the other day. The four corners of the horizon are surrounded by Palladio's Rotunda, the simplicity of a square and a circle, the simplicity of symmetry, a trap. Its elegance belies the brutality of the labyrinth of the world in which the Rotunda acts as the radiating core. The Rotunda, designed by the architect Palladio in Vicenza, Italy, considered an original of the Western tradition, commissioned by a political advisor, a consultant for the Pope, a wealthy landowner. This is an image of Saturn eating one of his children. It is one of the paintings inside the Rotunda. The building looks suspiciously, when viewed in a cursory manner, as banal as a bank, and then you realize that it is a kind of nightmare, a kind of perfection, and a kind of joke. 4 massive identical entranceways, box a cylinder, and crowning dome. There is no back or sides to the building. It is all front. Hysterical. This more than doubling, this more than mirroring, makes the entranceway into a phantom architecture, and your own presence in relation to the building an act of fevered vision. The overly invoked identity maybe and finally seems to be designed to dwell a god determined to leave or to arrive in a grand fashion, but not necessarily knowing where in the compass, the trajectory of duty or desire, or would it be all predestination, calls. The masquerade of excessive stability and exacting symmetry produces a vertigo of perspectives that makes the building wonderfully insubstantial, makes it virtual. The building, so apparently solid, spins off to a kind of timelessness. A child repeats a word over and over again, to learn the word, but also to establish the meaning as a sound. Here, the repetition of the entranceways, identical on all 4 sides, are repeated with the same insistence. This iteration establishes the meaning of the building as purely the articulation of space. The last work designed by Palladio was the Teatro Olimpico. The first work performed in the theater was Oedipus Rex. This was in the 1570s. Its color is orange, and every other color. It can't be denied, a city of drinking, of smoking, of sex, of tourists stoned, shopping and fucking. They come here to drink, and they come here wanting to burst their seed into the immaculate whores. Sex workers in antiseptic white lingerie that glows under the violet black lights like the exoskeleton of a yet classified species of subterranean bug. I don't mean to say that cruelly. I have never seen such dazzling white lingerie. Is it the famous Dutch obsession with cleanliness? Architecture is considered the earliest of arts, but prostitution, as everyone knows, is the first profession. I imagine these women in two architectural lights. They form an impenetrable barrier between the excess of desire and the will to carry it out. They cancel the future, absorbing every thrust like a mother tolerating the tossings and thrashings of a child. They profit from the simple biological by furthering the delusional intoxications of anonymous sex. What does this sex produce? What does it build? Always the same, for centuries the same, tomorrow the same. It is a punctuation in time, to mark time, to imagine it exists, to escape its passage, to suck the pleasurable tit in the blank of sense, the biochemistry of a turgid organ, vibrating for so many guilders in one of so many enclosing holes.
Do you think if I take a picture of this, you will see anything on my camera?
We made a choice for architecture, two young architects. We were impressed, one by Lars Stuyvesant. That's the one responsible for the shining part of the building. Lars Stuyvesant published a lot about architecture, but he never built a building. This is a lot of talking about publishing, about a lot of computer stuff, and so on, morphing with computers. But we were impressed about his idea.
Oh wow, that looks bizarre.
The idea of visiting Mother Water, a sort of sacrifice area.
The green building is Renzo Piano's new Metropolis, a palace of science and technology in an industrial and working-class part of the city. And not 40 paces away from this building, the need for architecture is far from her mind. Her need for science is personal. The structure is escape and the dissolving of identity into an ease without form. Science, like art, is a lie. It doesn't take as its first account that humanity's primary problem and glory is also its last. What to do about the driving fact of being alive and inevitably going towards death? Unfortunate needs still rule in the northern paradise.
Gaudi said that nature was his architectural teacher. Here, on this great platform that overlooks Barcelona, he built a massive snake bench. His partner Hockenhull clad the snake in ceramics, broken pieces of tiles, fragments of plates, china dolls, and shattered glass wine jars, creating a fantastic collage without precedent. This bench, that is immense, is an invitation to intimate conversation because of the sinuous quality of it. It is full of isolated bays.
There are few things sorrier than a lopsided architect. My left foot gave out. It simply refused to work in its habitual manner. I began to hobble, cursing with pain on every second step, and at every third attempting to empty my mind completely, to transcend the pain. The side effects of this self-hypnotic remedy, a headache, the kind in which wide-open eyes feel they have been whacked with a raw wood board. I became nasty, short-tempered, aggressive, over-emotional, and, because extremes call out across the wasteland of the middle way, ecstatic. My foot felt like a bad foundation put up by a sleazy developer. I began to lean over. When I started to stand up, I soon collapsed. It was funny. It is amazing how dependent standing and walking is upon feet. Then, on top of the structural damage on the left foot, I began to grow some blisters on both of them. skin, Amantia muscaria mushrooms, masks, webs, bats, alive and malleable, cellular, undulating, errapt, warped. A maximum possible intensity of natural light for the times. Animals, plants, and the human body as process, as one key point of reference. Building as a topography of the alive, as transformative space, as space transformed.
I have seen historical photographs of this building, and they appear otherworldly. Horses and buggies in front of this friendly sci-fi alien structure. How could it be that it is so futuristic when it was built 100 years ago?
By my scientific calculations, I have come up with these conservative estimates, photographs and video images of the Sagrada Familia. 120 photographs a minute times 60 minutes equals 6,120 an hour. Now 6,120 times, let's say 12 hours a day, equals 73,440 a day. 73,440 times 7 days a week equals 514,080 a week. Now 514,080 a week times 4 weeks a month equals 2,056,320 per month, and then thus the above figure times 5 months a season, equals something like 102,806,000 a year. Pictures of the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona. Okay?
This modernism, a rationalism and functionalism that makes every place into a dentist's waiting room, won over the exuberance and instinctiveness of the modernismo of Gaudi and his company. Done right, it is not without a sterile and neurotic charm, but what it really championed is apparent cost efficiencies and standardizations. The waiting room turned into an asylum of mindless productivity, a way to architecture the human out of existence. This is the last and the tallest building designed by Skidmore, Piranesi, Will and Sons. A competent exercise in contextualism, an arresting monolithic gatepost. With minimalist surfaced postmodern intentional historicism and ambiguity, bound in leather like stripping that wraps the building in black metal, vigorously expressed. The continuous columns lying outside the main wall planes are sheathed in marble. The spandrels are smoothed face slabs of black and white slate. The crystalline structure of calcium sulfate inspired the unique design. The proud stepped back silhouette of the tower dominates the Chicago skyline with erect certainty and elan. These tubes are bundled together to form a megatube, providing lateral strength to withstand wind loads. A massing so perfectly reinforcing the power of perspective. A masterpiece of international modernism. A masterpiece of postmodern pastiche. A masterpiece of early skyscraper intentionality. This building expresses the dignity and grandeur of the original tenants, one of the foremost gypsum companies buildings of America. The banking floor, with its tall columns and high coffered ceiling, is not only a monument to finance and chalk, but one of the grandest interior spaces in the city. It is a dramatic termination that sheathes the skeleton frame, gently projecting aureoles that are reminiscent of Burnham and Root's Monadnock building. The structural bays are divided into two-story contained units with inmates' rooms arranged around a common lounge. The triangular shape allows maximum perimeter space so that each inmate's room can have a 5-inch window, the maximum allowed without bars by the Bureau of Police. The shape also minimizes interior corridor space that requires surveillance. The roof houses a walled exercise yard. This is the last and the tallest building designed by Skidmore, Piranesi, Will and Sons. A competent exercise in contextualism, an arresting monolithic gatepost. With minimalist, surfaced, postmodern intentional historicism and ambiguity, bound in leather like stripping that wraps the building in black metal, vigorously expressed. The continuous columns lying outside the main wall planes are sheathed in marble. The spandrels are smoothed face slabs of black and white slate. The crystalline structure of calcium sulfate inspire the unique design. Proud stepped back silhouette of the tower dominates the Chicago skyline with erect certainty and elan. These tubes are bundled together to form a megatube, providing natural strength to withstand wind loads. Amassing so perfectly reinforcing the power of perspective. A masterpiece of international modernism. A masterpiece of postmodern pastiche. A masterpiece of early skyscraper intentionality. This building expresses the dignity and grandeur of the original tenants. One of the foremost gypsum companies of America. The banking floor, with its tall columns and high coffered ceiling, is not only a monument to finance and chalk, but one of the grandest interior spaces in the city. It is a dramatic termination that sheathes the skeleton frame, gently projecting aureoles that are reminiscent of Burnham and Root's Monadnock building. The structural bays are divided into two-story contained units with inmates' rooms arranged around a common lounge. The triangular shape allows maximum perimeter space so that each inmate's room can have a 5-inch window, the maximum allowed without bars by the Bureau of Police. The shape also minimizes interior corridor space that requires surveillance. The roof houses a walled exercise yard. This is another romantic painting of a glowing, reconciled world by the most famous Berlin architect, Carl Friedrich Schinkel. (1816, 1818). He's building the new watch. One of the patched pillars of the bullet-ridden guardhouse. A summer residence designed by Schinkel in the suburbs of Berlin. A pile of brick, not 10 minutes away from Potsdamer Platz. This is maybe the Prince Albrecht Palais, parts of which were redesigned by Schinkel. A dance hall in the Palais. The entrance hallway around 1900, also designed by Schinkel. The Prince Albrecht Palais becomes the headquarters of the SD, the security service of the Third Reich, the internal informer network of the Nazi state. It was responsible for not only spying on German citizens, but coordinating propaganda for the furtherance of Germanism, from, quote, racial science, end quote, to music, theatre, and architecture. Question. Is it possible to imagine an architecture that would be anathema to the perverse office clerks of state-ordered sadism?
Notice that some of these men are wearing armbands. It's Germany, just before the war. On the right is a painting by the architect Schinkel. It's a romantic picture of the beginnings of Western civilization and of Western architecture. no point talking about architecture without bringing up rubble.
You know how Albert Speer died?
Sooner or later. I mean, that's the result of architecture, isn't it? The more grandiose the architecture, the better the rubble, I figure.
He died of a stroke in a hotel bedroom in London in 1981. He was in London for interviews with the BBC. Speer, who had been married for years, was staying in a fancy hotel room in downtown London having his first affair with a young German woman.
It sounds syncretic. And what? Whimsical? But it's not. That is warm and fuzzy logic for you. Simultaneously horrific and harmonic.
It's extraordinary, he said. I had to be in my 70s to have a first real erotic experience with a woman. Tall, dark, blonde hair, slim, under 30, in a white negligee, and me next to her in trousers and a white turtleneck. Silk, I think.
Of course, he died soon after he finally got it up. And it was in relation to somebody else. And that is saying something for an architect.
Everybody's got some history. My father was one of the airmen who took part in destroying Germany at the end of the war. He was 18 when he helped destroy Dresden. My father was haunted by this all his life. Incredibly, the Brits have put up a statue to the man most responsible for the final raids, Bomber Harris. Monuments are official architecture, official history.
sono pregati
The mosque masks what it most wants to reveal, where everywhere a strict geometry is presented, an emulation of the undeniable exact plans of God, Muhammad, and the placement and direction of the faithful. The Arabic script and its decorative elements undermines the imposing symmetries of the severe God with a dizzying layering of letter forms. Language and writing come first, and language and writing come last, and the lips from which they speak are not always in the head.
April 23, 1998. The mayor of Istanbul is appealing a sentence of 10 months in jail imposed by the law courts of secular Turkey. He is considered the leader of the Islamic opposition. He is charged with inciting hatred. He quoted a famous Turkish poet.
Kubbeler miğferimiz, minareler süngümüz, camiler kışlamız, müminler de askerdir. And kubbeler miğferimiz, minareler süngümüz, camiler kışlamız, müminler de askerdir. Author's name is Ziya Gökalp. Okay? Thank you. Yeah.
Which compares the dome of a mosque to a helmet and the minarets to bayonets. The police are out, I am told, in case of problems. Buildings are never simply buildings. Birds in Istanbul are mind readers. They pick up the thoughts of humans. I was sitting outside the Hagia Sophia, okay? That means divine wisdom. A man walks by and says, "You are from Chicago?" Now, out of all the cities in the world, why the hell does he pick Chicago? And I say, "No, I'm from Canada, but funny you should say Chicago because I'm going there in a few days to be interviewed for a teaching job. So I may soon be from Chicago." He says, "You want to buy a leather jacket?" And I say to him in my typical buy nothing mode, "No, I can't carry a bunch of stuff." He goes on his way and I think to myself, a leather jacket was the only thing that had crossed my mind that I should buy in Istanbul. I had tried on a couple of them while in Amsterdam and told myself that no, it would be cheaper to buy one in Istanbul. And I'm trying to figure out how this guy could have asked me those two things when I see him later conversing with a couple of really suspicious looking birds. We are adrift in our destiny. The currents that break around us is architecture. It was strangely at the Istanbul Film Festival that I remembered that the last refuge of the love of architecture is the love of film. The eternal of stone has been conquered by a machine that projects shadows and light. I saw a documentary on the life of Sergei Eisenstein. His father, why hadn't I remembered, was an architect. Sergei himself was trained at his father's prompting as an architect. Architecture embodied time and the aspirations of history. It has been supplanted by a more perfect record, a medium closer to that of human memory. Human memory, a protean narrative fabricated from a montage of chance, desire, and the arabesques of power. The similarity between architecture and memory, both are pure constructions. The West made a decision for me to build new spatial coordinates, to build without gravity. The real world had become too expensive and only for the rich and the very, very poor. this world was a world without life. It was too pure to sustain life. I had to leave the West further and further behind to remember the drawing of the most simple and yet the most complicated of shapes, the circle. I found myself towards India.
Having read about it in the guidebook, we think, now I know this place. I can risk going there because I have received a forewarning as to what it is I will see. This is an architecture of expectation. Then one faces the real of open sewers and malarial mosquitoes. Sounds are louder, the flies more numerous, the people thinner and fatter, and the light of the sun slaps onto the dry earth like wet, fresh dung. All the staring eyes generate a question in my head. Calculating interest, it accumulates to form an internal question. Why the hell are you here? Why are you away from home? This is a variation of the why are you here? Which is a variation of why are you? Which condenses to the central why. Thus, every journey is a journey of no return to a place that doesn't exist, except of course for the naturally stupid. Then New York City is New York City, Chennai is Chennai, Vancouver is Vancouver. Leaving an empty space, we arrive at a fresh void. We wonder at the differences of the shadows. This is the architecture of arrival.
The mountain, that is Shiva, that is one of the lingams of light, that is the heart of the world and is the realized self, is a building, but one that is utterly of the cultural imagination.
Actually, we have a proverb in Tamil which indicates this, saying that it's actually in Tamil we call it as "Katrathu kaimanal," that is a sandful, just a handful of sand. That much only we have learned. But Kallada the Ulagal, so what we have not learned is the size of the world. So every man should remember that in Tamil we have that proverb.
The Shiva Lingam, yes, a phallus, yes, situated erect in a vagina, and the center of devotion in a Shiva temple. The Victorians must have blushed with embarrassment and envy in comparison the virginity of Jesus and Mary and the glories of the cross of suffering. The Shiva Lingam is also most contradictorily representative of the formless nature of God. This is a conundrum that is only answered in the highly erotic intoxication of ecstasy and in the esoteric architecture of the rites of devotion. I cannot trust the civilization from which I come. I have no faith in my own people. Lies, and neurosis are the order of the day, and the marketplace, which is a gambling den, is the deceiving construct that motors the dynamism of the whole contraption. The academic and intellectual classes are not blameless. The vast majority are at best loose cogs in the same machine, the machine that Adorno said simply revolved in the same spot. How can one build when the foundations don't exist? It's easier to see this from afar. In many traditional societies, the human is a pivot point between the arc of descent and ascent, the living architecture of the cosmos. In this view, the human, as the last stage of earthly creation, is a synthesis of all reality. Who is this human? How does one complete the circle of creation, and through these creative acts, participate in the primordial act of creation itself? There is nothing more timely today than timelessness.
Bombay Central.
In all this talk about globalization, which seems so often simply a liberal view of westernization and the ever-straining arms of corporatism, I recall that there are cultures that are really and utterly other. Look at these buildings. From the perspective of a West Coast North American, they might as well be on another planet. Of course they are ancient, but they are also living institutions of a living culture. In the earliest days of Buddhism, the Buddha was never represented directly, never personified as a man. His presence was alluded to through symbols. The bow tree, his enlightenment. The lotus, his birth. The wheel, his teachings. The very building itself also represented the Buddha. When I showed a rough cut of this film to friends, they told me they found this section difficult to understand. Where was the personal story attached to it? However, the point of this architecture is not about any I, not about the ego, but about the disappearance of the illusion of self. The spiral of the world begins and ends at this vanishing point. You must walk to the ghats, which line the edges of the sacred river. The maze of narrow lanes can be managed only by cows and humans. Varanasi, Banaras, Kashi. Names for the city of light, center of devotion for the Hindu civilization. Its present life reaches back to the 6th century before Christ in a continuous tradition. Peking, Athens, Jerusalem, all ancient cities, yes, but only Kashi continues to exist with the same ethos as it originated from. Shankara and Buddha taught here. At first, the visitor experiences it as a horrendous tourist trap, noisy, annoying, full of subterfuge, polluted. However, if you are fortunate, you may come to realize that there is no place on earth like Kashi, a city that reflects life by always remembering death. It is said that the membrane between this world and the transcendent reality is so thin as to be virtually transparent in Kashi, because dying in Kashi brings liberation. Living here is an anticipatory participation in that liberation. Those who dwell in Kashi, intending to die here, are called liberated while yet alive. They are recipients of the sidelong glances of the alluring goddess Mukti, who is only as far away as the moment of death. Here, where there are more gods than one can count, there is also only the suddenness of one god. have sent you all the letters I could. I know you have found it insufficient, so I'm sending this stone too. As you see, it's shaped like an egg. Make of it what you will.